Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and this is a podcast dedicated to owners of accounting, bookkeeping, and tax businesses. It's all designed to actually address each and every week various topics that you can work on in your business to help you, in fact, build the premier accounting firm in your area and get paid what you're worth. It's in this that we'll actually invite on the guests to cover topics that range from marketing, selling, pricing, onboarding clients, client relations, all the way through to and including mental health and a variety of other things that are very important to us as we each run our businesses. Today is going to be a wonderful episode. I've got on the show Jesse Rubenfeld. Jesse happens to have grown up in Houston. He began his career in New York City at Lime Group of companies doing the books for a variety of businesses, gaining experience with nonprofit, software industry type businesses, hedge funds, and management company in accounting. Now, after serving in LimeWire as their CFO for the last 4 years, he joined D.E. Shaw Group as the controller of research division that builds supercomputers to revolutionize drug discovery. And from that, he began his own interest in technology, which allowed him to then automate financial operations, first with spreadsheets, then with Perl, and then most recently with Python. He founded the company FinOptimal, and it was basically done to help QuickBooks Online-based businesses streamline their financial operations, optimizing their value per dollar with an outsourced accounting service heavily focused on automation. Jesse has his bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Columbia and currently lives again in Houston with his wife and 3 children. So Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. I have to correct you. We have a fourth now for 2 weeks. So
welcome to the
date.
addition.
Sorry about that.
That is beautiful. A son or a daughter?
A daughter.
Excellent. How's mom doing?
Good. Thank you.
Excellent. You bet. So, well, then we've got to update that little bio there with this new edition. That is amazing. Well, I am a new grandfather. I've got my first grandchild, so newborns are quite the thing right now for me. So I wish you the best with all of that.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So let's get started into this. I do want to back up and just kind of set the stage. I always want to know what drew people to become accounting professionals, to the profession itself. So give us a little background as to why did you become an accountant?
Well, undergraduate business school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did well in and enjoyed an accounting class that I took. Debits and credits just somehow worked for me. And at the end of my at the end of college, I had an opportunity to play an original song that I wrote for Billy Joel.
Okay.
And he said to me, I think you got a great career ahead of you if that's what you're going to do, after I performed it for him. And he said, "What's your last name? Rubenfeld? Oh, so you might not need an accountant." First he told me to get a lawyer, and he's like, "Oh, what's your last name? Rubenfeld? So you might not need an accountant." Okay. So that planted the seed. And then I went to work for an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I went to work for one who needed an accountant, and that's what he needed. So I said, that's what I'll be. And so I sort of fell into it. I learned that, by being in accounting, like if you're in an accounting role, you effectively become the eyes and ears, financially speaking, of the business.
Very true.
And it gives you access to a lot of different facets that you otherwise might not get exposure to if you start in a different track. So while I didn't begin doing audit or tax per se, I did get to see a wide range of financial operations and why accounting matters. And that really got me excited about accounting process. And that's how I got into it. It was somewhat of an accident.
Interesting. So I'd be amiss if I didn't go back and obviously ask about the musical audition. So I definitely need to do that. But then we're going to jump into the accounting. So give me a little bit more of a background or understanding of what that was that you just described.
Well, so I'm a piano player, and I wrote some songs, and I was really excited when at Penn, where I went to undergrad, they announced that Billy Joel, who was absolutely my musical hero, was coming to the campus to do some performing and to do some questions and answers.
Interesting.
So I wrote a song about him, and I got some people to help me make some noise. So, he would call on me. And then I said, "Hey, I want to play this song for you. and he let me come up and play it. It was all taped. A&E was taped. He was promoting his classical album. So I have professionally produced television footage of this to show my kids and grandkids. So yeah, that sent me on a little bit of a diversion for a while. I performed in New York thinking, okay, I can be a rock star like Billy Joel.
Yeah.
But I always had a day job working as an accountant. So
a day job as an accountant. Okay. And your music career has not taken off yet.
Not yet.
There
but
you
yet
go.
Was the key. I thank you for saying yet.
Exactly. I meant that. Yes. So This is what we're holding on to in the interim. So I've got Jesse here, my future music star, that I'm going to say I my claim to fame is I knew you at the start. So that'll be good. All right. So let's get into the accounting. You mentioned the word entrepreneur early on. You're working for an entrepreneur, but you also said you had that bug. How did that bug manifest itself? How did you know you wanted to eventually have your own business, and why did you start FinOptimal?
When I was in undergrad, I had a class on I think it was called Entrepreneurial Initiation. And the professor was basically a guy who had started all kinds of businesses, from, a Subway franchise, right?
Okay.
Hey, a restaurant, to something, to professional services, to manufacturing. And he just told stories about starting a business and anecdotes about employees and customers and ways to sell your business, different kinds of arrangements. And I just loved it. I ate it up, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I don't have any skills yet, but one day when I do, I want to be like that guy.
I love it.
That got the bug in me. And when I was interviewing for jobs after school, I thought to myself, hey, this guy's doing a lot of different stuff. LimeWire was just one of his many businesses.
Okay.
This is eventually what I want to be.
So where did FinOptimal come from? How did that strike your fancy as that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I was always very interested in programming as a kid. I played with Apple's HyperCard and HyperTalk framework, which is kind of an early programming language. And in my first job, I was doing data entry for AP. I was doing bank reconciliation, including going on to the bank every day and seeing what new transactions were there. It was a lot of very entry-level block and tackle that I know a lot of my colleagues listening will probably fondly or not fondly remember. And I started trying to automate things, parts of the monthly close where I sort of knew this could be done better. And I was working, one of Mark Gorton's companies was Tower Research Capital, which is basically a program trading firm. And there were a lot of computer programmers. And by talking to these programmers and learning tricks from them, I came up with ways to elevate my role, right? Elevate the role of the accountant from just doing the data entry to growing into a more strategic set of eyes and ears.
Love it.
Right. And that starts with automating those tactical functions that a computer can do, looking things up, copy pasting, manipulating Excel spreadsheets. So I did that for several years. D.E. Shaw later hired me as a controller, and a big part of what I think they wanted me to do, and that I think I did successfully, was to improve their financial operation, which principally was accounting, but also budgeting and a lot of other things that I know your listeners' firms do as value add beyond just, cranking out financials. Mm-hmm. All of which have some component that's conducive to automation. And I, doing this in-house for 10 years eventually gave me the idea that, hey, I could do this for more companies. QuickBooks Online was increasingly exposing their functionality through APIs to a wider array of functionality. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I just started taking clients, and FinOptimal grew from there.
I love it. So in that long journey of a career, what did you finally realize as you went from that bookkeeping process of recording the transactions to realizing accounting could contribute to the business, help it be strategic, as you mentioned? Why does accounting matter?
Well, accounting is the language of business. One of the interim roles that I haven't mentioned was CFO of LimeWire, which was toward the end of my tenure at my first job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have good books, it's hard to be a part of the conversation about what your company's worth, about what its strengths are, about what experiments to grow the company worked and what didn't work. And I wanted to be able to speak with authority on those topics when it was my turn to speak. And for that reason, keeping good books, which I think is often thought of as a strictly tactical function. And when I say keeping good books, I also mean all of the financial operations like AP and AR, like revenue recognition, like interaction with third-party software, right? That a good accounting system is a strategic move, right? Choosing to invest the time, energy, resources in a strong accounting platform improves your visibility, improves your vocabulary when you speak the language of business.
I
Right?
love
You can
that.
translate with qualitative statements as opposed to more anecdotal, squishy things.
Well, I think you're saying it very well because the conversation that you're describing is, as I would imagine it, is here we are as accounting professionals in a room where a lot of times, like you just ended, people just speak in hyperbole. Sales are up. We're working harder. We did more. We sold more, whatever. But the accountant, it's almost like it's fact checking. It's almost like we're Googling internally in the business, what are the numbers actually telling us? And you can quantitatively either say, yeah, sales are up. We were up X number of dollars or X percent over last month, last year, year to date. And all of a sudden it starts to give a quantitative, a very specific reference to whatever that hyperbole statement was. Sales are up, we're working harder, things are going well. Well, what does well mean? Well, it means that we're doing better than last month, and here's how and where and why. So I like the absoluteness of that, the quantitative side of the accounting. So I know that you speak of 6 questions to test, to filter accountants, and one that most get wrong. I wanted to go over those and have you introduce those.
Right. So shifting gears into how we find accountants, we use a product called Classmarker,
Okay.
which is essentially an online testing. It's an online testing facility, right? You can use free form questions. Ours are multiple choice, and it's 6 questions, very like questions that are going to test your ability to read a question about professional behavior, right? Hey, your client asks you ABC. Do you do this, that, or the other thing? And because it's multiple choice and can be graded programmatically, we can look at people's responses and evaluate whether they're likely to have the stuff and potentially be a better fit. So we use it as a preliminary filter when we post a job ad, just to avoid spending a lot of time on um, on candidates that probably are not a good fit. Like a good example would be, one of the questions that everybody gets is accrued expenses on the balance sheet typically carries a debit balance, true or false? And, a very significant percentage of people will get that wrong, either because they're not used to speaking that language. What does a debit balance mean? Or, and that's just a great filter.
So are these test questions part of the interviewing process as they're applying to obviously work for you, just as a way to assess not only their skills, but their ability to apply accounting situations or terms in a real world situation?
It's more of a screen. We have, resumes are great, but in an ideal world, we put a job ad out there and we get a ton of applicants, which we want, but we don't want to spend time. They might have a lot of accounting experience, but it didn't prepare them the way we'd want it to. So it's really a filter before we even respond to them and engage in the interview process, which of course is the most, resource intensive part of hiring.
And maybe you've already answered this, but I know that you've mentioned that of the 6 questions that you would use to filter accountants, there's typically one that they all get wrong. Is that the one that you were mentioning?
Yeah, that's a big one. Another one that we often ask is about Excel. We'll say, VLOOKUP how many, how many arguments does VLOOKUP take, right? And the options are 1, 2, 3, and 5, or 1, 2, 3 with a fourth optional and 5, right? And you may not know what the word arguments means, but if you've ever written a VLOOKUP statement, you know that you've got 3 things, and then if you want to at the end you can say false or true. Most people will know that, but like if they guess 1 or they guess 5, you just kind of know they probably haven't ever really built a VLOOKUP statement that they remember.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, when you're asking these questions, do you find that it really gives you the candidates you're looking for in the interviewing process? And have you since added any more to the 6 that you started with?
Great question. We do have probably 30 questions.
Oh, wow.
And the test has, everybody gets several questions that everyone gets. It sort of helps us equalize things.
Okay.
And then there's another set of questions that we used. If everyone's getting the same questions wrong, we know there's a problem with that question. And occasionally we'll get a candidate that says, hey, your question's bad. This is not a fair, it could be this for this reason and that for that reason. And we'll go back and update the test. But yeah, it's a pretty good, certainly we're filtering out some people that we want by mistake. But for the most part, the people that pass that test, and it's a very small percentage, it's less than 5%.
Wow.
They're not going to be a waste of our time to interview.
Yeah, well, at a minimum, what I like about this is the fact that in the interviewing process, it's more than just asking them for a cover sheet and a resume. You're having them answer some questions. You're at least having them, in one way or another, identify or share some of their skills, their experience, their knowledge. And by doing so, it's adding to the screening process. So I like that you're doing that.
For somebody who worked as a professional recruiter for finance and accounting, your feedback means a lot to me there.
Well, you're right. For a number of years, I was doing temp and direct hire placement, and it was interesting. Some people just felt that they could just put a resume on my desk and assume I would take that and not ask any questions, even perhaps not even go so far as to check references, and just take them and start promoting them to my clients. And I thought that was pretty arrogant on their part to presume that, yeah, you've got 10, 15, 20 years, perhaps you've been a controller, a CFO, and I'm just going to take your word for it and take you to clients that are paying me fees to find quality candidates. And so we did put them through some tests. We did look at even the most basic of things, just typing skills. And it was interesting how some people felt that they were above that. But in the reality, I would assume that if you're experienced and so forth, you'd be willing to prove that or at least demonstrate it. And that would just allow me to be that much more capable of explaining why you're such a good candidate when I would go meet with my potential client. So I'm not opposed to asking or having people ask those questions or come up with some way of screening individuals. So very much so a proponent of that. So well done.
Well, I'm going to send you the test at the end of this podcast. I expect you to max it.
I don't know about that, but I'll be happy to do it. Let's do this. I want to go to another question, though, because being that you're so involved with the AI side and the programming side, and you've worked with the interface or the API to do things with QuickBooks, I know that in the accounting space for at least 5, now perhaps going near 10 years, there's been a lot of talk about bookkeepers needing to do more, accountants needing to do more. We're looking at this value add, the evolution of accounting. We've seen a lot of these different tools and technologies come in to really build tech stacks within firms. So what I wanted to do was first start with a question of how you feel accountants are evolving from what they've done historically to be more current and forward thinking in what they're doing with their clients.
That's a great question. I think it's still the evolution of the accountant has definitely been the slowest. The technology has grown so quickly. It's improved so quickly that I think most accountants, particularly the ones that have achieved success in, let's call it the classic model, have a little bit of whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I think that, I've tried to recruit candidates before that have told me stories about working at a successful accounting shop of a varying size, and they'll say, hey, look, I want to start using this or that software for our clients. I think it'll really help us do the work faster, and we'll be able to take on more business. And the partner's response, very reasonably, based on what had worked in the past, is, doing it faster, that's going to mean less billable hours. And I'm not sure I'm that interested. And I think those people, I can completely understand why they say that. But the model's definitely changing. And those people who are saying, hey, let's use these softwares are more focused on improving the process by which they do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit more results oriented. And unfortunately, a lot of those people wind up leaving and going to work for tech companies. But the ones that stay, I think, help the more experienced partners push towards a scenario where you're charging your client for results, and you're building a relationship between your client and your brand, as opposed to as much the relationship between the client and the partner, if that makes sense.
So I heard two things in there. One, getting away from obviously the hourly billing, we're more results driven, and therefore we're pricing our services based on what we do and what the client gets, rather than the time that it takes for us to do the work. And then the other thing that I was hearing you explain is that client relation, whether it be with the staff or with the partner. Let's start with the work itself. The limitations that the API actually has to try and systematize things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think that, and of course, most of my thoughts here are most relevant to a CAS practice. Right?
Okay.
I've never prepared tax returns or done an audit myself, although I am a CPA. But the APIs give you access to the data, but building an accounting system that works for your client requires knowledge. This is where I think people really overemphasized the extent to which accounting jobs were going to be automated.
Okay.
Right? And then, as we all know, fewer people went into accounting, and now we can't find accountants. But building the accounting system is definitely something that still requires your CPA or in-house accountant, as the case may be, to think through tool selection. There's so many products out there. How do you select which products are going to become ingredients in your constellation of software? So that element of designing and architecting, which I consider an artistic enterprise, right? It's a place where accounting meets art. I think CPA firms they have an opportunity to be a big player there.
Well, you're bringing something that's, I think, sensitive to a lot of the conversations I'm having. Whenever we talk tech stacks with firm owners, one of the things that comes up is how to decide which shiny object to actually go and embrace and bring into the firm. And I've had lengthy conversations about how to identify what next and which to do. And forgive me, I'm just going to go off on a small tangent here, and then I'd like your thoughts on it. When the firm owner that I work with, whomever it is considering what's the next technology they want to bring into the business, the first question I'm always asking is, who's the benefactor? Is this meant to actually help the client? Is this something the client's going to be interacting with, something that they need to be comfortable using and want to use? Are we going to have to sell them on why they have to log into it and do something? Or is it more internal, something that the office is going to be using that we're going to leverage in the business to streamline things, become more efficient, and the client will never interact with it, but they'll benefit from it? And that question in and of itself has helped so many conversations to say, well, why are we doing this? Are we doing this for our clients? Or are we doing this for us? The second question that usually comes up is it replacing or fixing an existing process or system? In other words, is it simplifying something we're already doing? And if not, then why are we bringing it in? Why are we trying to do something we don't already do and are not familiar with? So that's the next question. The third question then comes to, well, what's the ROI? How can we really put a definitive number to saving time, saving money? How are we going to justify this financially? Once those three questions usually get addressed, it's pretty clear what's next. But here's where I think the reality sets in. The reality sets in when the business owner decides, all right, team, we're going to do this. We're going to pay the money. We're going to go through the training. We're going to adopt it. We're going to implement it. We're going to basically run this in the business. And the first thing that they realize time and time again is it never goes as quickly as we think. The salespeople on the software side, they're pretty good at selling us on the idea that it's quickly and easily integrated. We can migrate data and so forth. But it never goes as seamlessly as it's expected. It always takes longer for the team to adopt it. There's always someone in the office that's reluctant to move forward. And so there's a adoption period of time. There's a learning curve. Not everybody learns it as quickly. So what we think we can adopt in a month takes 3 months. What we think we can implement in the business within 3 months takes 6 months. And that's the reality of what we've seen with any of these integrations. What are your thoughts, hearing me outline those 3 points and that experience?
I think this is a question that's right on the money. I think I heard one of Blake Oliver's podcasts talk about why accountants fear, what's the trouble with technology? I think another question is, will this piece of software be here in a few years?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it going to get bought? Am I going to have egg on my face when I put my clients on this and then it gets bought and they double the price, or they they remove service offerings? And, it's funny. I can't think of another industry, another vertical, let's call it, where software companies where it's as important that software companies sell to both the accountants and the end users, which is to say the SMBs at once. If you think about QuickBooks, there's a very and this is true for Bill.com, Expensify, Shopify, a lot of the other tools that we put our clients on, they have a really well built out accountant, let's call it portal. Mm-hmm. We are doing this ourselves with Accruer, which we're going to release soon. And it's really, really important that you bring your accountants along. And I think it's really important that accountants look for this when they're considering using a new software, right? There should be someone at that software company willing to take a phone call, right, with someone. They should see you as a really valued partner. And when they do that, that they understand that you are putting yourself out there for their brand to get your clients to adopt their tools. Because absolutely, for example, when we put our clients on Expensify, which we've had a great relationship with for 7 or 8 years, mm-hmm. We know it's going to help us, right? They're getting away from spreadsheets. We're getting attachments where previously that was lost in somebody's email.
Yeah.
But the end user's got to be convinced to submit reports and connect a bank feed and set up approval workflows, which we know is going to help them, but it's still a tough sell. And when the company's committed to working with the accountant, because the company's benefit, the software company's benefiting from the accountant doing sales and support for them.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a big red flag if the software company doesn't have a very strong outreach to the accounting community. And, we look for that. We also look for a strong API, but that's sort of another answer for another question.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ask that in a second, but just to address the sales and support role that the accountant oftentimes takes for these companies as we take these things to the client. On the support side, one of the things I always emphasize when I'm having this conversation with the firm owner is the fact that they need to be willing, as they adopt this, to eventually become the expert in that platform. I think presuming that we can be just superficially embracing, engaging, utilizing this tool is a fool's errand. We need to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to adopt this platform and I've got to know it in and out. I've got to be able to get into the intricacies of it and figure it all out, because I'm not only using it in the office, but I'm going to be taking it to the clients, or the clients are impacted by it. And I just cannot leave things to chance. And so in the coming months or year, my intent is to become very, very comfortable, very confident with my skills in this platform. And the reason why I bring it up is to your word support. I think sometimes the client doesn't see the third-party software as the person they are going to reach out to when something's not working as it should. They're calling us. We're typically the first line of defense. And so that's the reason why we need to be very comfortable with this platform that we've introduced to the client. So just some thoughts there. That brings me to the question that you were alluding to. What are some of the flaws that these apps have that tout that they're QuickBooks integrated and so forth, that they have this phenomenal API relationship with this platform?
Well, I think as a general rule, there are a lot of software integrations with QBO that are built as an afterthought. I'm not going to throw any specific companies under the bus, of course, here, but if I think of payroll providers, for example, they'll build an integration to QuickBooks that won't book payroll except at the very summary level: total gross payroll, total taxes.
Excellent point.
If you're lucky, it ties out the bank. If you're lucky, it ties out cash. Although there's plenty of integrations that don't tie out cash, and you're left wondering and having to contact support, right? So I don't really blame them for that. It's better than nothing. Accountants were previously used to just downloading reporting and figuring out how to jam it into QuickBooks themselves. So to that extent, it's an advance. But it's really important to think through how the accountant wants it booked. And I want to be forgiving of these companies, because so many, you ask 5 accountants how to book payroll, you'll get 7 answers, because 2 of the accountants will be circumspect about it and say, well, I could imagine it doing this other way. And it's hard to build software with that kind of diversity of requirement. But I think a precursor to building an excellent integration is a really tech-savvy accountant product managing that integration. It's critical that they understand what the accountant's going to be thinking about when they decide whether to use and ultimately how to tune and configure that integration. And I think, generally speaking, software companies are short on that, probably because such accountants are hard to find.
Yeah. What's funny is that question that you were just posing about payroll and how it integrates. That's the very conversation I had just a few days ago with our controllers. We were considering another payroll service. So not to go too much into detail, but that was part of the essence of it, is really how it integrates. So well said on that part.
I'm interested, Roger, in how you guys book payroll for your clients, because we've seen it so many different ways. And I'm sure it's different for different clients, but are there general guidelines? Do you try to come up with an SOP on how to get it in there?
Yeah. So I'm going to roundabout answer you. So what I've done is I've gone to our controller who does our payroll to offer some way of outsourcing it, basically to say, we do it internally, and is there something that you feel could actually streamline the process and help you, and allow her to delegate. And she wants to hold on to payroll quite firmly, simply because of the fact that she loses, and with any of these other third parties, all the details that we currently have within our P&L. We have in our company a number of divisions, classifications that we basically break payroll out into, and we cannot do that with these other integrations. And so for her, the specificity that exists in our P&L as to how payroll is allocated to the categories is hugely important to how my managers manage their departments and how we run our company. And she just doesn't feel that that's something that these payroll services are able to give us, that level of detail. So we can farm it out, but it doesn't come back to us as itemized as we would like.
It's so funny, the itemization there to get those kind of results. And we've done this for probably 15 payroll providers at this point. We build a layer of software for each payroll provider, where basically we take the most granular download available on the website, where you get payroll by person and every slice of every sort of expense or liability that goes into that. And we build a workflow that books payroll by person. Very granularly booked paycheck per person that still ties out cash using clearing accounts.
Yeah.
Right. And then, a lot of our clients want to allocate payroll by time tracker data, for example, so that they can see profitability by client more easily. Yeah. And we're doing all of this in QBO, right? Like we're getting, we want to help accountants get that kind of leverage out of QBO, because in this day and age, the API is so good that there's no reason not to.
That is great that you've been able to address that, because I can't imagine that what we've been discussing is unique to us. So that's very, very important, I think. So that's going to bring me to another question. When I hear the term finance automation, help me understand what that means and why it matters.
I would say it's a combination of systems and process, and necessarily includes people. Financial operations are combinations of software, data, control steps, and policies. And it's all about figuring out where you want the human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
You always want a human in the loop. Ultimately, you never want money getting sent out automatically at the SMB level.
Yeah.
If you're PayPal, obviously at some point things change, but you also don't want the person getting, tripping over things that are just more conducive to automation. So it's about becoming an expert on common financial operations, payroll, accounts payable, the monthly close, inventory, if you're working with CPGs, and architecting, trying to diagram it, getting people on board with process change, eliminating double data entry, increasing visualization, right? Graphs, spreadsheets that are well presented. How do you get your accountants to be advisors, not gophers? That's finance automation.
Yeah. I'm very big as a proponent of processes, systems, automation, SOPs. All of these things, I think, are what are essential to building a self-sustaining, living entity, which I believe every business owner should do with their own companies. And as you're describing this, I love how you also mentioned that very rarely should any of these things ultimately be done without some human interaction. I think that's a testament to the fact that the accounting profession isn't going away as a career, as a role. We have a place in business. And more importantly, I think that we are the face of the numbers. We have to be that translator. Early at the beginning of our conversation, you succinctly said accounting is the language of business. We've all heard it. But I think what we're missing in that narrative is we as accounting professionals are the translators of that language. We're the ones that can interpret this information to be useful for the business owner to use as they're making decisions, business decisions. So with all that being said as context, what do you feel the future holds for the accounting profession? What do you see on the horizon that might be a game changer?
Well, it's really an exciting exercise to think of all the different ways things could go. The headline to me is advisors. I think there's going to be less and less highly paid execution. I think that it's about telling the people who build the systems what you're looking for, but first and foremost, knowing what to expect. You mentioned trying to act like an owner, right? If you think like an owner, you're going to look for the outputs of your financial operation, right? Let's call it your dashboard for short. You're going to look for really informative, strategically valuable metrics, and you're going to work backwards from there to, well, how do I need to book payroll? How do I need to gather my time tracking data? How do I need to reimburse out-of-pocket expenses in a way that's going to support those reporting objectives? And I think the advisors partnering with the architects of finance transformation and an automation in financial operations builds a foundation for better service to the client, which is what we're all trying to do.
Beautiful. I like that you chose the word advisor, because I'm very much of the opinion that at the end of the day, what I think the business owners are really going to lean on the accounting profession for is advice. There's a lot of tech tools out there for them to automate their accounting. There's things that they can be doing that allow them access to real-time accounting numbers. The business can really kind of thrive at that level, but so often they're trying to run their business and they need somebody that can come in and say, these are the tools, here's the information, here's what it's telling us. we're not going to leave that role anytime soon. So that's really well said. So I'm going to go a little personal here. Here you are running a business. What was it like when you went to your wife and said, "Hey, hon, I've got this great idea. I'm going to go start this business." And what's that been like for you as you've started and run the company?
Oh, that's a great question. I remember speaking to the CEO of a big payroll company that I was talking to, asked him the same question, and he said, there's choices that I've made when my kids were little, and I can't necessarily go back and unmake those choices. Like it may permanently impact my relationship. I think those things are true. I just hope it's mostly for good, right? You leave a secure day job where you're performing well and being paid well, and you think to yourself, I think I can do this. I'm as well suited as the next guy. And it's easy to tell yourself that. It's kind of like it's easy to give money to a cause you believe in, and it's much, much harder to get your 5 best friends to contribute money to. Getting buy-in from your family, when you've got, I have 4 kids under the age of 5 right now, and I quit my day job at the end of 2021. So yes, that was a huge decision, and ultimately my wife's been very supportive. She trusts that it's what's best, but I'm sure it's very hard for her to watch. And when I show up late, and there's 3 kids screaming at home, I thank my lucky stars that I chose the right wife. But there are consequences. It's no bed of roses. That the steady income does go away, and you're on your own, and you have to really want it to take the plunge. But at some point, if you don't take the plunge, you're doing yourself a disservice, and ultimately, the world doesn't get the value, assuming you're actually creating it. So it's a weighty decision, and I believe in it. So it was worth the risk, and it's worth the pain that occasionally goes with it when reality sets in.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear your explanation of that, because I think so many of my listeners are in a position where they too are taking these risks. We're all putting ourselves out there oftentimes, and it's so nice to have a support system, especially a spouse that is understanding and supportive even during the tough times, because there are those moments that we need a cheerleader. There are those people that we're hoping will be patient with us. And I think so many of the people that are hearing this conversation are able to relate to the fact that on their side happens to be someone that's willing to support them, sustain them, and more importantly, encourage them. So I like that. You've got young children. This is another question for you that I think a lot of people can identify with. Although mine are old and grown, yours are young and just starting out. How do you balance, and I'm reluctant to use the word balance, but I'll use it anyways. How do you balance all the demands that the business has of you with, you've got this young family and you need to be that parent? How do you kind of handle that? Any advice that you'd have for the listener?
The short answer is team. On the one hand, my parents raised me to value time at home. My dad never came home late. We almost always had dinner together, and I'm proud to say I've managed to do that. I wake my kids up in the morning. I take them to school. I'm here to, eat dinner with them and put them to bed. But I'm not under any illusion that I could do that in a startup environment without really talented, well-developed, well-rounded leaders on my team that are keeping things running when I step out, at 5:15, 5:30, and they know I'm not getting back on until 9:30 or 10 p.m., to pick up some slack, literally some slacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust those people. I listened to your episode about delegation and about getting team members that you trust, right? How do you get past that chasm of, wow, if I don't do it myself, it's not going to be as good, right? That's definitely, I'm a new CEO. That took me some time to even begin to let go of. But I think it's mission critical, because at the beginning you teach someone something And and please, my team, forgive me for saying this, they're going to mess it up. Like, they're not going to do it as well as you. You can't communicate all the nuances you need to communicate when you're training, but you still know that it's the right move for your business, because if you want to live the life you want to live, which hopefully includes time with your family, you have to, eventually the result is way better than you doing it yourself, right? Because the diversity of their ideas and yours way, way, way overtake what even the biggest genius of accounting and engineering is going to be able to produce by themselves, right? Paul McCartney plus John Lennon is going to be greater than either of them by themselves.
Well said. I liked how you tied in there the fact that in the end, it's with the belief that everyone's going to be given not only the responsibility and the ability and the skills to do something, but eventually they're going to have the authority to do it and do it well. And I think in the end, like you said, it can be ultimately better than any of us can individually do, even though we initially had that vision or idea of what it could or should be. They can take it so much farther if we just give them that rope. The other thing that I would also point out is I loved how you are describing a culture. You're really defining what everyone is doing collaboratively there in the business, with this understanding of at 5:15 you're going to take off and be with your family. And I'm sure that sends a wonderful message to them as well. And at the end of the day, it's whether or not we're working to live or living to work that really kind of comes to the forefront here. So wonderful pieces of advice. So here's what I'm going to do, Jesse. I'm going to wrap this up, kind of draw a conclusion to this, and I'm going to come back to you for a closing thought and just see what words of wisdom you'd like to leave us with. But before I begin the summary, one of the things that I want to point out is, with all this discussion, I think what we need to realize as accounting professionals is we have an opportunity to become, for our clients, profit and growth experts, really step into that advisory role and embrace what I refer to as the universal business model. What we're basically doing here is helping our clients become their best. And as accounting professionals, when our clients grow and build their companies, we can grow with them. Our fees can increase, the opportunities to service and work with them grow, and the things that we get to see them experience as we're helping our clients be successful just make this all that much more rewarding. So for more information on how you can become, for your clients, a profit and growth expert, check out the episode description. And in the episode description, we're going to have some information there for you to take and look at as to what it is you can do to complement the services you're currently providing in the accounting, bookkeeping, and tax space. In addition to that, I definitely want to encourage you to check out the episode description for additional tidbits of information regarding to Jesse and what he's been doing. I'll put some information there that you can take advantage of, such as contacting and linking up with him on LinkedIn, which I would encourage you to do. But as a summary of today's conversation, I'm going to start first and foremost with the music. I like that we began there simply because I think it's a good example of how we each have so many parts of our lives that make up who we are as a whole. Each of us have our passions, our interests, things that we do. And accounting is is something that we do to pay the bills, perhaps. And I hope that we can each kind of embrace our holistic selves. Hope you have good hobbies, good things that you do as extracurricular activities, things that you're aspiring to do, because they are part of this journey that we each are on. Now, as for what the accounting discussion led to be, I think we had a great conversation regarding why accounting matters. Obviously, with Jesse going into roles of CFO and such, he really got to see how the voice of the accountant matters in the boardroom and how it is so helpful to the business owner. We need to be able to quantify the information that's being said and take this abstract of the company's doing well, or we had a difficult month, or things are up, things are down. We can actually be the one that quantifies that and puts it into a numeric, a value, a percentage, and really bring continuity to the discussion. The other thing that I wanted to kind of draw attention to was we were talking briefly about screening and qualifying those people that we have work for us. I think it's really important that we understand that it's best to be a little bit more diligent in the hiring process, finding the right person, putting the right individual in the seat on the bus, let's say. But at the same time, I think in that process, we really can find the ideal candidate. And more importantly, see where they may be lacking as to when we offer them the position, what we may need to train them on and help them with to fill in those gaps. But ultimately, a good hiring process is hugely important. So I enjoyed that conversation about the 6 questions that they use to filter out the accountants. But then the latter part where we talked about automation, the integration through APIs of various softwares and the tech stack that exists in a business. I really do feel that as accounting professionals, we need to embrace technology and see what it is that we can do to streamline, become more efficient, more productive in our time, to really allow us to step into that advisory role that we ended on. I think there's a lot to be said about just becoming, for our clients, much more of a strategic component to the relationship. And so I thought that was really helpful. And then lastly, I like the personal side, just really addressing the fact that behind all of us are those people that are supporting us, friends, family, spouses, and they are really essential, I believe, to the support that we need, because there are some difficult times that always creep up. And more importantly, it's always nice to celebrate the successes with someone. So definitely, I hope that you as a listener have those individuals in your lives, and I encourage you to acknowledge them and embrace them. And then as for children and family, I really appreciate the fact that Jesse was able to point out that family does matter. I agree with that. I remember the fond times of taking my children to school. I did it every morning. I specifically arranged my day that it didn't begin until I was able to actually drop off my children to school. And I did that for over a decade. Many years my kids were in school, took them basically to school for elementary and junior high. And those are some good memories of waking up, getting ready, and taking them off. Just some good time in the car together with them. So really wonderful conversation today. So Jesse, thank you for those insights. What's a final thought that you'd like to leave with us today?
In closing, I want to say that we love to help accountants, whether they're at companies or accounting firms. We want to elevate their role and embrace automation thoughtfully. Please check out my LinkedIn posting tips and thoughts. I'm Jesse Rubenfeld, or our website, FinOptimal.com.
Perfect. Well, with that being said, I encourage everyone here, if you've not already, to subscribe to our podcast. Definitely go back and listen to our past episodes and the other guests that we've had on the show. Lots there to binge. And at the same time, if you haven't already, mark us to give you the notifications of each and every week when we come out with the new episodes. In addition to that, I want to invite you to GrowCon. Every year we have an event for accounting professionals, owners of firms, to come and basically interact with your peers, learn from the experts on stage, and most importantly, get to actually see what is going on in the business, the best practices to in fact have the premier accounting firm in your area. So check out information regarding GrowCon in the episode description. And then as for this conversation, if you would like to apply these principles in your business or others that we've discussed, feel free to reach out to us here at Universal Accounting. You can contact us by going to universalaccountingschool.com, or you can give us a phone call at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care, have a great day, and be safe out there.